Hey everyone, welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's The Business Program. I'm your host today, Scott Mantz. Now, before we're joined by our guest for today, just want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Now, over the last year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million. Let me say that again, $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. So if you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask. If you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description, so check it out below in the comments section, and thank you for your support. And without further ado, the film is The Gateway. It is in theaters and on digital starting September 3rd. It is on DVD and Blu-ray starting September 7th. Our conversation today is with director and co-writer Michele Civetta. Michele, welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation.
Hi, Scott. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for having me. I'm real excited to dig in and talk all about the film.
We're very excited to have you dig in and talk all about the film. And there's only place to start, and that is the beginning. How did this come about for you?
So the film was actually a script that my dear old friend Andrew Levitas had, optioned years back. And so it was an example of inheriting the project. And I was asked to basically kind of rewrite it from page one and just kind of breathe like new life into what was there.
So, when you read a script like this, and because of the ensemble and because of the lead actor in the film, it is clearly an actor's movie. So what appealed to you just sort of the meaty performances that you knew that you could get out of a movie like this?
Well, it's, the film, or the script rather, started as, a typical genre piece. And so the idea was, at least when I started to rewrite it, was to build it to be more of like a neo-noir. So it had, more multifaceted components, more roles, more characters. Like, for example, the Frank Grillo character wasn't in the first draft. And so to build out, just more of a multiplicity of how these actors can kind of I'm sorry, wrong terminology. Just the juncture where they all kind of meet along the way. And so ultimately, that's why a lot of them, I think, have such a particular fusion, because they all kind of are heroes of their own movie in some ways.
Well, one of the things that really struck me was just how this feels like a throwback in some ways to like the gritty anti-hero sort of movies of the golden, my opinion, the golden age of Hollywood, that new age of Hollywood, the 70s. And Parker is that sort of like 70s throwback anti-hero. What made Shea Wiggum perfect for Parker?
Without a doubt, Scott. I mean, it definitely was. I'm totally inspired by like the BBS era of like King of Marvin Gardens, and just the whole 70s school of filmmaking of, it seemed to kind of favor not your typical leading man, and your leading man was usually morally ambiguous. And so everything was in shades of gray. There was no, the moral compass is totally different. And so with someone like Shea, I mean, he certainly, I guess by definition has always been more of a character actor coming into this. And a lot of the great actors from that era, whether it's like a Warren Oates or even a Bruce Dern in that era, I mean, they would oftentimes be playing against type or kind of suiting up for like the main role. And so, with Shea specifically, I think it was such a great exercise to really dig in and just, kind of take all the attributes of what he's done over the years and so many amazing projects, and just kind of hone all of that work into, one film under his umbrella, so to speak, being the lead.
Well, Shea Wiggum is phenomenal. He's, like you said, he's a character actor, a journeyman actor, and he is doing something he's never done. He, at least in a feature, having a lead, and he's in virtually every scene. How happy was he to really dig into a role like Parker, and what came out of the character, what came out of his performance after your collaboration with him?
Well, Shea approaches everything from, a real method kind of sense memory approach. So he does a lot of the homework leading into it. And, we certainly crafted a lot of nuances along the way early on. But, from the get-go, I remember it was probably on our first or second conversation about Parker. We came up with this moniker, which is, he's a social worker who can't take care of himself, but he can take care of others. And it was almost just like a secret ingredient to just understand more or less the tonality and the moral responsibility this guy has, kind of in terms of how he calibrates with the rest of the characters in the story. So, from there, you're always just filling in blanks along the way. It becomes kind of like a beautiful poetry in time.
He's definitely got a lot of layers, and you see those layers when he interacts with Olivia Munn's character, when he interacts with Hagen Burns' character. There's definitely a toughness to him. He's dealing with his own demons. He's looking for his own redemption, but then he's got this real vulnerable side to him. I mean, is there anything about Parker that is not just a dream role for an actor to play?
Yeah, no, I think those complexities actually really is what makes that character tick. I mean, it's about having those dualities, and having, in films, in most narrative, it's always just about, what is the pre-life of this character, but what are we actually seeing? And so, it's something we were really cognizant of, just saying, let's express all these nuances of who this guy is. And that really becomes the sum total of who that character is.
Well, when you're talking about, so Bruce Dern, who plays his father, I mean, talk about a legend. And just with a few scenes in the movie, Bruce Dern just captures so much. I mean, you're just riveted by his performance, and he is a legend. So when I ask you about work, I mean, really, working with a legend like Bruce Dern, and what surprised you as a director? Like what impressed you as a director about working with Bruce Dern?
Well, I mean, Bruce he's a sublimely intelligent and incredibly, well-seasoned actor, as you pointed out. And, with Bruce, our relationship really kind of navigated out of our frame of reference from the get-go. And then, he's very auspicious in his, delivery from the get-go. He basically will tell you, I worked with 5 great geniuses in my life: Hitchcock, Quentin Tarantino, Hal Ashby. Actually, I don't include Hal Ashby because he was stoned most of the time. And so you're aware of the caliber, what he's doing, but what his amazing takeaway, I guess, from working with this myriad of incredible artists was they all gave the actors the ability to do one primary thing, which is to express and emote what they were doing. Meaning, like, you can have all of your presumptions going into it about a character, but to actually let an actor express is what he thought was the greatest gift an actor could have. And then you can go to take 10 or 15, and simultaneously he's, known, I guess, and this is why a lot of people really, really love working with him, for what he's aptly phrased the Dernsey. And the Dernsey is he will drop, call it an ad lib or just an extenuation of what the scene is. And he might bring it into a very unexpected place, but it's a form of being reactive. And, many times, you can be very perfunctory and get too used to the text. And I think when an actor comes at it, it's like, Muhammad Ali hitting you with like a left hook while you're prepared to be jabbing or something. You lose rhythm, and in that sometimes comes truth. And so it's unexpected and keeps everyone on their toes. So it was electrifying to watch Bruce, bring the magic that he really has.
Absolutely.
Me,
I know exactly what you're talking about with the Dernsey, for sure. I know exactly where you're going with that. So as a director, some directors do 10 or 15 takes, some do 50. Some actors really give their actors, some directors really give their actors a whole lot of direction. Some say, whenever you're ready, do your thing. Where do you fall into that? Like, how much do you really, really direct your actors? How much do you just rely on the trust factor to get what you want?
There was certainly a ton of preparation in terms of, conversations, building the emotional cadence and sketching the blanks about who these characters are, for each individual actor. Ultimately, how we approached it was different depending upon their personalities and how they'd like to work. I always say that one of the guiltiest secrets of most directors is that they're actually intimidated by actors. And I know I spent many years, shooting tons of stuff over the years as commercials and all this stuff, because it's trepidatious to go there. But when you start to really dig in, you arrive at a place where it's malleable, it's liquid, it's intense, and you're extracting from your guts. And it has such primal honesty that I always say you're no longer on script at that point. You're actually in the moment, and that moment has intensity and calibrations and fears and repercussions. But you have to be willing to go to that place so it's honest. And I was grateful that all these actors really found that kind of balance simultaneous. And I think Shay really helped a ton to kind of implore everyone to be at that level.
So as I mentioned just how Parker has this vulnerable side, and for Olivia Munn's character and for Tegan Burns, who plays Olivia's daughter, how was Shay there for the two of them? What was the trust like between the three of them?
It's such an important point you brought up, Scott, because, from the get-go, working with children is always very specific because you have to build a relationship of trust. And so in this instance, it was really important. And, Olivia from the get-go said, I want to really get to know Tegan. And they went off to go to the movies together, and they were eating together, and tried to, just build some semblance of, an understanding as people and as a relationship from the get-go. And with Parker, that became simultaneous, in the sense that you're building from what you know. And I think that at that point, they were able to freestyle and be very, kind of trusting of what each other's ideas were, Well,
what about Frank Grillo? He's, works just as busy as Shea Wiggum, if you ask me. What is it? What is his energy as an actor?
Frank has an incredible intensity, but an acumen and a real artistry as a person. I mean, he's very cultured, and he's very smart. Like when he was on set, he was so giving to the whole crew. I mean, we were in stitches laughing, and he really brought an incredibly convivial atmosphere to it, And with the way he works, I mean, he really buckled in. We had a bunch of conversations and just kind of identified the nuances of what his character was going to be. And we kind of came up with this funny terminology of rhinestone Guidos. So it was kind of like you're a cowboy who kind of maybe was addicted to like Saturday Night Fever back in the day. And so from that, then we started playing with music together back and forth. And we just kind of filled in the, backstory of what kind of guy he was and what he was into. And I think from there, because in his character, he's really expressing some pretty complex, divergent political opinions. It was important to, keep that character a little bit bombastic, but also, honest. And I think he really did a great job of navigating those two worlds.
Yeah, when it comes to the kind of prep that actors will do to really get into character, what kind of prep did Zach Avery do? And I understand it was really immersive.
Well, with Zach, it was very important for me because, he has like a best friend character who kind of represents his criminal life in the story, that he basically got to know the other actor who plays Lewis, Alex Wraith, real well. And so those guys would actually go running together, kind of leading up to the shoot. And then, Zach he's a very even keel, kind of like very, down to the earth kind of like guy. And so he didn't really have much of a frame of reference for, being a hardened criminal or, what it would be like to go to jail. So when we were tech scouting and we ended up spending an unfortunate afternoon in the local prison, it kind of dawned on me getting to know the warden, perhaps it would be wise just so he has a frame of reference that we can see if Zach can actually, be admitted to jail. So he ended up spending a day and a half in prison. He had to do his fingerprints. He had the full strip search and, issued all the county numbers and slept overnight there. And he came back and he said, I had no idea how harrowing that is as an idea or as an experience. Like, granted, it was a day, but just, to be stripped of all your rights and, behind the county walls, it definitely gave him, I think, some sort of a trigger just to at least have some sort of sense memory awareness, and I was really happy he was willing to do it, because it just felt like it was the only way to keep it honest,
So you definitely feel like that kind of immersion brought out his performance to the level that he wouldn't have had he not done that.
I don't know. These are just tricks along the way. So, you can't say one thing was more effective than another, but I do think at least it gave him, a lexicon that he could play off of, and if nothing else, like just an overarching sadness from what he just had to experience,
What did the experience of filming in the community and filming in the projects, like, how was that experience for your cast? Like, and how did that bring out, a higher level to their performances?
I've always been like a real big believer in shooting on location when possible, because it just has a verisimilitude, a grit, or a realness in this instance that, is harder to replicate on stages. Not to say that you can't achieve similar results for, if you're doing, say, an interior scene in the living room, but, every wall tells a story when you're a housing project. And, so it's like, there's just nuances, textures. And, like I started collecting gun shell casings during the course of the shoot, because it was, a very dangerous neighborhood. You had to have, squad cars with you throughout a number of the kind of more interior scenes for the housing projects. And so it's palpably real, and, it adds texture without a doubt, and everyone's aware of that. But simultaneously, I think, specifically for Olivia and someone like Shay and Tegan, it has a visceral quality that, when you get to know the people in the neighborhood you're filming in, you start to derive a sense of harmony and just where you fit into that as like an ecosystem, so to the point, like we had our art director, Jack Ryan, like one day when we were doing one of the exteriors there, he gallivanted a whole gang of kids with chalk, and they started painting murals. And so, it's like those murals were murals that probably are still there in those neighborhoods, but it kind of just became an extension of, this make-believe place that we get to create from. So it's special.
While you're filming, like what sort of like memory sticks out at you as a performance or a take that blew your mind?
There was, it's a tough one, because I was almost having a review just in the backlog of everything. But for me, the instance that was the most interesting, and I think it basically kind of put both myself and Shay off balance, is we'd going into one of the scenes where he first encounters Bruce Dern. The screen was, the scene was written to be a bit more confrontational. And ultimately, the way that Dern came into the scene had a real different emotional cadence. And so it was almost like initially Shay was going to be playing above Dern, and then Dern kind of shifted the dynamic. And with that in mind, we had to find a whole new emotional equilibrium to make the thing work, to have context and the rest of it. And to be honest, we were a bit dizzy at first. We're like, we don't really quite understand how this is melding or how it's going to contextualize in the rest of the film, because you're shooting a block of it, but within that, there became this beautiful calibration between both of them as soon as we trusted enough to understand exactly how the scene had to play out. But it was an example of just, trusting in the moment and discovering, that you can't be too sacred to the text of what's on paper or how you necessarily envision it if you can discover something else while you're letting it come to be,
Well, do you think of yourself as a director that requires a lot of takes? I mean, some directors just do less than 5, some do more than 15. Where do you stand?
I mean, I love the idea of printing the first take if you can, and moving on. I'd always do a second for safety. But to be honest, I really think that every actor is its own unique thoroughbred in how they work, how they engage, and depending upon the consistency of what you have to achieve. That some folks, it takes 15 takes just because the resonance of what the scene is. It's like you're just not quite discovering it. And, some stuff is very easy for everybody. So it can be done in 3 takes, and, obviously your time logistics kind of factor in heavily to that. But, I do have to say that these actors made my life a lot easier throughout this process, because we imbued a good trust going forward that you just kind of know when it's right. And we would double check. And specifically, Shay is very dogmatic in his persistence towards perfection, which I am an ardent admirer of, to the point that every night when we say goodnight after shooting, we always say the exact same thing, which is blood on the floor, which means you don't leave the stage until you're bleeding, because you've just given everything you can, every last bit of honesty. And I think ultimately with that, it's like you find the truth that you're willing to reveal, and sometimes it takes 3 takes and others more,
Right. Sure. Absolutely. And one question I like to ask during the SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversations when I'm interviewing an actor is, when I'm talking about a director, I'll say, what makes this director a great actor's director? So now that I'm flipped over the conversation here, how do you try to be the best actor's director that you can be?
I really think for a director to be in sync with actors, it's about being open, trusting, having a humanity in terms of what it is that they're exposing. Because I also, on the flip side, say that, sometimes a director is basically a psychologist to a lot of, very undisciplined children, that you're basically finding a way to, calibrate their psychology in a way that works for what you're trying to do, in terms of how you are trying to calibrate a world of different ideas. So every actor is coming at it with a whole different set of ideas, and simultaneously personality quirks or, individual needs, no different than anybody in your life, And so I think the more you can be respectful of all that, you do find a balance, I think, that, makes it all work.
So because this is your second feature, your second narrative feature as a director, how did working with this cast make you a better director?
I mean, I just knew I had to be on my A game all the way through. And, I just prepped like a maniac. Like I refuse to sleep until I know it's kind of right. So I feel like, I'm grateful, because it was a total learning lesson along the way, that I learned so much just about, what you have to offer and how you can engage within the process of acting, because it is truly a fine craft, between all the craftsmen, the cinematographer, as well as, the director, obviously, that it's about the circle of trust. And with that, I think you get to a place where, you can just be honest. It's like, I never want to be the kind of director who's, just parked in front of a video village that's kind of like further removed. I mean, it's just not kind of in my nature. I like to be out there on the floor with everyone. And I think that, you really have to just feel like you're in it together, because you become a family for this period. And with that, you cross-communicate all these ideas. That's the beauty of filmmaking, because I always go back to the terminology that Tarkovsky used for the title of his autobiography, which is sculpting in time, which I love the idea that you really have this one moment in time that you can capture all this in essence. And so you're actually creating this, in 3 dimensions with live living individuals, and then it's printed and it's there on celluloid or whatever it is for, time to come.
So when you started filming to when you finished, how did your goal when you started to make this movie change when you were ready to wrap? Like, did you finish the film with the same goal that you had starting it, or did your goals sort of change and evolve during the filming of the movie?
That's a really interesting question. I think, look, I certainly went into it with like a preconceived notion and a master architectural plan of what I thought it was going to calibrate us in terms of what the performance would be, what the sounds and the music would be, but it's an experience you actually go through. So you definitely take that away, and that becomes part of the process in the editing as well. And so it's like the nuances of ideas that occur is what makes it so malleable, I think, throughout the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, instead of asking like, hey, what do you hope the takeaway is? I'm going to rephrase that to be like, when you make your films, when you do your work, do you have something in mind like that, like where you go, man, I hope people take this away from the movie? Or do you make the film you want to make and hope people take away whatever it is that they want to take?
This specific story, my goal was to create a morally ambiguous kind of world, meaning like it lurks in shadows and light, and it has non-definition of ambiguities of who's good, who's bad, and everyone's morally flawed. And so I think the takeaway is really in navigating all that is didn't want to put this film in a box that everyone says, okay, this is the A to B answer of exactly what this journey is. I think good stories should be like life. Like you have to reprocess them and decipher your own meaning from it in some ways. And with that said, I think for me, what really became apparent and what was so important was just the humanity of, how all these characters intersect, that, they all have their own moral code, but reason to act for why they're doing what they're doing. And so even whether it's right or wrong, it's, what impels them forward. And so I think with that, the overarching conceit is that, the families and the humanity that comes across in terms of how these characters intersect is really what leads the story forward. That it's a story about redemption and simultaneously, one of promise, even in the face of adversity.
Well, once again, The Gateway opens in theaters on September 3rd, also on demand on September 3rd, on DVD and Blu-ray on September 7th. Michele Civetta, thank you so much for joining us for this SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation.
Scott, thank you so much. And you guys keep up all the great work with SAG-AFTRA. I'm so happy to hear about all the relief funds with the pandemic. And I just hope everyone's getting on solid as the world comes back into gear.
Thank you so much.